empty glass.
Woo! Gang! Welcome to Death Curse Society. It's time for another full episode. I'm your host, Red Crank. I got the Colonel, and I got Zigzag. Is that a sucker? What is that? What was that?
Oh, had a friend made a little Michael Myers, little stuffed, little dolly. Cool. Isn't he cute?
Yeah.
So cute.
Do you fuck it?
No.
Anyway, this time around, we have a very different episode of Death Curse Society. God, that's so weird, man. Why are you
I'm just asking because it looks a lot more comfortable than this. Okay? This thing chafes after a while.
All right.
You don't clean it.
We have a very special episode.
Touche.
But we've got a special interview exclusively with Vincent DiSanti. He's going to join us here shortly, and we're going to talk about Never Hike Alone, Never Hike in the Snow, and all the other Jason projects that he wants to do, which is a lot. So let's bring him in.
Let's do it.
Put the sock away, put the fuck toys away, and let's be professional for a little bit. Fuck. Here comes Vincent. So, gang, we are joined right now by Vincent DiSanti, the writer, director, star, producer. You didn't edit it. Your wife edited it, correct?
Yeah, my ex-wife edited it, and but I did cut some of it. I do edit it, and I did cut some of the scenes, but she's the one who assembled it all in Avid. I'm not as formidable in that program as she was, but yeah, I mean, I do editing as well. Wrote some of the music for it. What else did I do? Production design. I mean, basically, I've done everything for every department, and then I get burnt out and actually find someone who can do it for me. So it's usually, that's why I like to build the biggest team possible, because if not, you end up doing kind of everything. I think you can probably relate to that, doing a podcast and having to kind of scramble and do all the stuff that's not just like recording it, but finding the recording equipment and uploading it and cutting it and editing. It's one of those things where like you just gotta, if it's just you three, you take it upon yourselves to do all the work yourselves and divide it evenly. And it's kind of the way we get things done at Womp Stomp.
Nice. Well, the films are Never Hike Alone, the two primary ones we're talking about, and the new coming Tuesday, man. Are you ready for this?
I know. I got a color review tonight.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, you've never been on our show. We wanted to kind of look back and just get a little bit of background on you. Where did you go to school? What was your initial love of filmmaking? What drew you to wanting to do film?
Yeah, for me, I mean, it really started early. I think like most of us, I was a kid, grew up in the VHS era. So when I went to go rent tapes from the weekend, when it was time for, I was good at school all week. I didn't get in trouble. So my parents would bring me to silver screen video. And it just so happened that Friday the 13th was like eye level with me at the time, however short I was. And I just loved those covers. I just saw them and I was like, what is that? I have to see it. And it was really like Jason Lives' final chapter, like with the knife through the eye. And I was just like, that seems amazing. I got to see this. And then like, obviously Halloween and Nightmare on Elm Street and all that stuff was there too, but I really became obsessed with Friday the 13th. And like for years, I just hounded my friends about being like, hey, come over. We're going to watch Friday the 13th this weekend. I rented 4 through 6, and we'd sit and I'd make them watch the movies over and over again. And I did that for years. And as I grew up, like, as I went in high school and stuff like that, I played sports and kind of like was in that world, but I always talked about movies. I always, I wore 13 on my jersey because I love Friday the 13th that much. And I wore 13 in every sport that I did. It always kind of carried through me. And when I was a kid, I thought I was going to grow up and play Major League Baseball. That didn't work out. I ended up going to Hofstra University for my freshman year. I was studying journalism. I wanted to do broadcast journalism, sports journalism, things like that. And along the way, like Friday the 13th came with me the entire way. I just loved watching the movies. I was a huge Jason fan, and I didn't grow up in an area of the country where there were a lot of conventions. There wasn't a lot of people dressing up as Jason. Cosplay wasn't a thing. There was no online community for me to go find my friends who were also big Friday the 13th fanatics. Like it was just me, and then my friends who tolerated my Friday the 13th craziness. And then, I spent my freshman year at Hofstra. I transferred to URI to be closer to my family my sophomore year, but I didn't really enjoy the journalism aspect anymore. I was kind of seeing that journalism was kind of becoming something different, and I wasn't really on board with that style of like life, of what I was going to have to do, doing the things of what I really wanted to do. It didn't, everything in life is hard. And then when you realize like how difficult it really is, it really tells you whether you want to do it or not. And what I realized is I really wanted to pursue film. So I transferred again. I went to another small school called Worcester State University. I played baseball there, and I studied film and television. And so shifting over to film and TV rather than focusing on journalism per se, kind of reintroduced me to the fact that I probably should have always been pursuing filmmaking. And actually what I started doing and what I became good at in college was editing. By the time I was done my senior year, I was basically teaching the class for the professor, who I was finding more things in Final Cut than he did. He knew the aesthetics of cutting. He cut with film and stuff like that, and he had kind of learned Final Cut and was teaching the kids how to do it. But I just kind of gravitated towards it. I loved cutting. I just had a sense for storytelling and pacing and all these different things, and studied it. Eventually I got out of school. I worked at a liquor store for a year. And just kind of saved my money, and I looked for a job, and there was nothing in Massachusetts, and my buddy was living in Los Angeles. So he mentioned about a PA position that opened up for Curious Case of Benjamin Buttons. And this was for the VFX department, so the post-production. And I had never worked in post-production before, or really had any, I knew my friends were in VFX. They talk about it all the time. I watched them kind of grow from Bryce 3D to now Houdini, and do that stuff. But that was my first job. I was a production assistant for the VFX team who made Brad Pitt look like a 90-year-old man. And it was a really cool experience to see it. I mean, some of my first weeks on the job, I got to watch David Fincher direct Brad Pitt on a green screen stage, just directing his facial movements and things like that. And I started to really see that, like, I really want to tell stories. I really want to direct, but you can I can just walk out the door, throw a rock, and hit 15 people who want to be a director and want to do movies and stuff like that. So it was a dream that I really kind of buried. I didn't tell anybody what I wanted to do. I mean, what I really wanted to do was find a way to work on a Friday the 13th film. I mean, when I first got out there, the 2009 film was in development, and I was trying to get a job at Bay Films, and they never even took my resume. And then as it went into legal hell, and I started to go in my kind of career, I actually found my way into commercials, and then landed in feature animation, working on children's animation films. So I worked on a film called Freebirds. I then worked on a film called Rock Dog. I then worked for another company where I was supposed to work on a film called QQ Speed, which is based on a Chinese video game that was supposed to be made into a feature film. I was actually producing it and managing it and running it. And we ended up shutting that production down for various reasons, as sometimes things happen. And I ended up switching back over to the studio's main film that came out, which was called Duck Duck Goose. But this entire time, I'm looking for a job in Friday the 13th. I'm tracking the legal battle. Not the legal battle, but I was tracking more of the rights of it. Transferred back to Paramount. It was going to be going back to New Line. They were trying to make a film in between. They did the found footage, and then they shifted it and turned the found footage into David Bruckner's second version. And then it went to Breck Eisner's version. And I was tracking it the whole way and trying to get a job at Bay Films, trying to become a PA or trying to become a coordinator on these films, but they just had no interest in me as that. I mean, I never even got past the front door. And then when the film didn't happen,
another reason Michael Bay is just a complete asshole. Right?
No, I mean, it wasn't Michael Bay's fault. I mean, it's just the way it is, and I was just a frustrated fan. I think a lot of people are probably frustrated. I feel like my glory days with Friday the 13th are watching them 1 through 8. I love the first 8. I love the Paramount core. I know 7 and 8 are a little bit crazy, but it feels like the first 4 films were the films that really had the tone that we all love. They had that, but Jason became awesome in 6 through 8. So it was like, I was always wanting that film that was like, I want both those worlds together. I want that world where like undead Jason is in a more like streamlined Friday, and you put those two things together, you're going to get a great film. And when 2009 was coming out, and I read the synopsis and I saw what was coming, and they were like the Rambo Jason, and somebody goes missing and they're looking for them, and all this stuff. I was like, that's great stuff. That's actually real storytelling. Like, this is going to be good. And then when I watched it, it just felt like, oh, this is kind of the same old thing I've seen before, but not as good. Why? They got $20 million for this. It's like, why? How can they not tell a better story than Joe Zito, who had not enough? I mean, Joe's a great director, but you have so much more than these guys. You have so much more than Tom McLaughlin. You have so much more than Steve Miner had. This is 2009. We have all the best technology, And all you had to do was just look at the franchise that was never supposed to be a franchise and say, okay, if you were going to make a franchise, how do you build a foundation on that? How do you make a first film that then paves the way for 3 more films? And as I'm watching the film, hoping that, oh, they're going to fix the continuity. Oh, they're going to put this into direction because they know they're making 3 films. And I watched the entire film going, this is not set up for anything. Like, this is so broken. And you can't build anything off of this. It's only going to be like old Friday films where nothing connects again. And I just remember being really upset and let down. And I think after years, like you guys probably meeting on Friday the 13th, the game, and talking about it with your friends and discussing it with other people in forums and arguing with it and having real personal battles about where you think Friday the 13th should go, I just said, hell with this. I'm going to show people what I think a Friday the 13th should be. And eventually I started working on Never Hike Alone. And that's how I kind of got into this kind of spin that I'm in now.
Very cool.
Just a fan film. And it comes to this. I wanted to ask you, what was the first one you actually got to see in the theater? Because for me, I was 9 years old and a babysitter dragged me to a drive-in. They got in the back seat. It was a double feature, The Hollywood Nights and the original Friday the 13th. And
wow,
the first movie, I'm trying to watch what's going on behind me, And then as Friday the 13th began, nothing else was happening. I was terrified, and even in a car, all the way around. So I'm just curious, what was your experience like in a dark theater, seeing those characters like that the first time, and how did it hit you?
Well, my first theatrical experience was a little film called Jason X. And here's how it was for me. And I had been looking forward to it. I knew it was going to be ridiculous. I went into the theater. I dragged, I want to say, 8 people with me. I was like, we got to go watch this movie. Because my friends, I think, enjoyed my love of Friday the 13th more than the actual films themselves. Because I would come out talking about them like, oh, did you see this? And the way they did that, blah, blah, blah. And like kind of start breaking it down. But we went, and it was only us in the theater. And every time Jason killed somebody, we were like, 1! And like the movie would be like 2, and like we were just like having fun, and like for us it was a fun experience. The movie was god awful for so many different reasons, and then amazing and for so many other reasons, and we had a good laugh and we had a good time. So I think that I always kind of like associated that first experience with that. And then when I moved to LA, I actually got the experience of being able to go to theaters like the New Beverly and other ones that show classic films and do marathons, something we never did in Massachusetts. So once I got to go see the marathon films, that was great. Being able to see the original on the big screen. I've seen every single version of the film on the big screen now, which is pretty cool. It's some either a festival or at a reprint. I mean, I got to go see an original print of Final Chapter last year with Joe Zito there. I actually went as a guest of Judy Aronson, which was really cool because we worked together on 13 Fanboy with Deb Voorhees. Yeah. And it's been a really cool, I mean, me coming into my own with my love of Friday the 13th and making Never Hike Alone as a fan, it's opened this door for me where I've now had to have this really great experience as a fan to like meet these people and have a presence within like the alumni of being not like a part of them, but being kind of like recognized for my fandom and allowed to see some things and allowed to talk to people. And going to a convention with Never Hike Alone, having the ability to then obviously work with Tom. Tom can get me in a door and say, here I am sitting with, him and Ronnie from the game and Larry Zerner, and we're having like dinner at Mad Monster in Phoenix. And so there are these little experiences that like, I'm there and I'm happy to be there, but in the back of my head, I'm like pinching myself like, this is so cool. These are my heroes. Like these people I really idolize. And I've watched Larry on screen for all these years. And obviously I idolized Tom for everything he did in Part 6 from the Return of the Living Dead series and the American Ninja series and all the other stuff that, he's been a part of. And obviously Ronnie had just, the game was out. It was still active at that time as far as like there were no lawsuit issues. And they were still producing stuff for the game, and they had allowed us to design a kill for the game and stuff like that. So I had worked with him and Randy kind of a few months before, and we knew each other from that. So it was just like, it's been a real surreal experience with like, not only like experience in the movies, but also now experiencing the alumni too. So it's a real cool, like, I don't know, it's just really cool.
Colonel, you got a question about early years?
Yeah, first of all, I want to say thank you for being one of the few people I've actually talked to that their first theater experience was Jason X due to our age. So that's nice. I have to hear these guys all the time. Whoa, I saw this and this in the drive-in. I'm like, yeah. Goes to Hell came out when I was like 8, man, 9 years old.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to go see it. Like, I literally, Jason X was my first experience. So talking about the Paramount 8, that's what I like to call them. Those are obviously the core for all of us that are fans. Which films, maybe in particular, your favorite that kind of stands out among the other 7?
The 3 top that I have, it goes 6, 4, 2. I feel like those are the best executed films. I love Tom McLaughlin's kind of take on it. I really like Undead Jason. There's something that's he's like a freight train that you can't stop. There was something kind of cool about that. And even and it was like the films kind of finally got the funding in that time. Like it almost kind of reached that, like the 1 through 4 was like, it's really, even though 2 of them are out of that era, my favorites, it was definitely very kind of indie, kind of that level. And part 6 was when Jason kind of became like a rock star. He became that pop icon, and it was so like that opening scene with him rising out of the grave and then the ending with him being buried in the lake. There was something so iconic about the way the film started and ended that felt so bigger than life. And I think that that's really why I gravitate towards that. And that's why I kind of tell stories a little bit in that realm. But, I always respected the filmmaking quality of Joe and Steve and the films 4 and 2, because 4 is such a like, it's so well put together. The characters are so good. All the through lines in that film, there's not a boring character in the film. Everybody's got something to do. They're either really, really funny or they got something going on, and they're not boring. And I felt the same way about 2. I feel like 2 is a better made 1. I feel like it's 1 over again, but it's just, there's a little bit more craft in the direction. There's a little bit more craft in the kills. It's got a little bit more money, and you can tell they kind of see what they're going for. And I think, like I said before, like my taste is, I wish that, Friday the 13th really didn't figure out what it was until about the 3rd or 4th film. And it really grew into its own in 6 through 8 when Jason became that icon. So my feeling is that I've always wanted to see, like, imagine if they made a Friday the 13th knowing all they know now and just started over again, and then had a fresh track so they can go like, okay, continuity wise, we know where to go and where not to go. Concept wise, we know where to go and where not to go. And that's why I got so upset with 2009, because it was like, did you ignore everything that like was there? But it was also a big lesson that I learned. And it's something that I've learned over the last few years because of Never Hike Alone, of seeing the diversity of fandom and how we all have different loves and we all have different experiences. And so like when somebody tells me that they love Jason Goes to Hell, whereas when I was a kid, I'd be like, you're crazy. Now I go, okay, yeah, I get it. I that's the type of fan you are. I know who you are. I know what you like. I know why you like it. And I'm able to kind of respect it. And in a way that you can only do that when you get kind of older. When you're young, you just have your ideals, you kind of pick your lane and you fight for your battles. But as I've gotten older and I've seen just the diverse kind of fan films that have been coming out as far as storytelling and the stories that people want to see and the way they want to see Jason look and all this stuff, it's like, I understand it and I get it. People have this, the franchise is so broken in a way that it's allowed for this diversity of fandom because there's something for everybody. Like if somebody's a fan of one film, that film is for them and that group. And it speaks to that group. Fans of New Blood love that because of either Kane Hodder or John Carl Buechler's effects and things like that. It's not a great film. I mean, like the story behind it is kind of wonky. There's telekinesis and all, but people like that. But somebody who doesn't like that is going to love part 2 or part 3 or part 4, or, there's people who are like, I love Freddy versus Jason. And you're like, but okay. You can never take one fan and say, this is what a Friday the 13th fan is. And I think that's one thing that studios have never understood, is that there is no uniformed Friday the 13th fan. It's like we all are Friday the 13th fans, but we're all different shades of, red, I guess you could say. And that's what makes us so interesting and why it makes it so hard to make a Friday the 13th that appeals to everybody.
You touched on something there that I want to explore a moment, but you mentioned how none of the continuity really hardly matches up at all in almost any of the damn films. But now filmmaking has changed so much. I mean, a lot of people might go in, yeah, I'm making a movie. Well, do you have an idea what you want to do after this with this movie? Oh, yeah, I could make 3 movies after this. The director and the writers normally have like some through fare that they're trying to get through. And then there are scenarios like the Marvel universe where, you know, they've got a big whiteboard and, okay, here's 15 movies that we want to make. How do we do it? And they've got it all planned out. Do you see like a future like that for the Friday?
That's what I think.
Franchise?
Well, see, I think Friday the 13th does need that. That's how I was taught to make films. When I went into animation, I was taught the whiteboard and the cork boards and you know, note cards and putting the film up and really tracking things out and thinking about that. But because I was a Friday the 13th fan, I always kind of think of beyond the movie. I always think that there's a chance that this catches and they want to make a new one. Like when I was working on Freebirds, I was working on Freebirds too, like trying to see if that was like going to be my opportunity to be like, I know how to continue the story. And I think that was something that like Friday the 13th taught me. It was, I watched all the mistakes that Friday the 13th made, and it made me hyper aware of it. It made me hyper aware of setting up story and story thread and continuing it forward and realizing that you can do things in story that kind of shortchange you down the way. So I've always had kind of a concept of the bigger picture. But with Friday the 13th, I don't think that they could necessarily make a 15 film arc in one specific genre or one specific story, only because I think they can do 3. That's in my plan. Like, trust me, I'm trying to get into this world and really do this for real. And my idea for Friday the 13th, if it's going back to the theater, there's a 3-film arc, and it has nothing to do with Never Hike Alone. It would be a start from scratch, kind of retelling that pays attention to the story points of Friday the 13th and retells them with just a couple of changed things, but it's so recognizable that fans won't be like, this isn't Friday the 13th. I think that it's the Friday the 13th that if they knew how Jason was going to be so popular, they would have done it this way. And it actually goes against some of the things that I even kind of do. But with Never Hike Alone, it's in its own universe. It's supposed to be a offshoot of If Jason Goes to Hell Never Happened. I like to say it's kind of like if Jason went down another storm drain at the end of the film and washed out to sea and went back to Crystal Lake and has been dormant for 30 years. And that's the way I feel as a fan. I feel like the Jason I know and love, the Jason from 6 through 8, has been dormant. And he hasn't been back on screen since Manhattan. And even as silly as Manhattan is, it still feels like the original Jason. It still feels like the Jason I know and love. And then everything after that doesn't feel that way. And I've got movies and we've received films and we've watched them and we've praised them or we've criticized them, but it still hasn't felt like, man, I feel like I haven't gotten a real Friday the 13th in a long time. And I feel like there's that. And so when it comes to Friday the 13th, as far as a giant spectrum, I think that what needs to happen is a 3-arc film that has like basically like it's like 2, 3, 4 again, where we get kind of something like that, or 4, 5, 6, where you have this continuity, you have characters that carry over, you have events that lead into events that lead into events that pay off, and you get one big payoff at the end of it. And you have a final conclusion, which leaves you in that world. And I think, you know, if somebody wants to continue those stories, you leave the doors open for them too, but you give something satisfactory. I also think that what Friday the 13th needs to do to move forward is move to the streaming services. And that's where you have your 15 films, but they're not connected. You have things that's Jason X2, you have Jason in Hell, Jason Escapes New York, Pamela's Story, What Happened to Chris Higgins, Roy's Revenge, have, you know, Reggie the Reckless come back and remake Jason Lives opening, but with Roy, and have like a parody of Friday the 13th, do an animated Friday the 13th, do a stop motion animated Friday the 13th, something for everybody. So it's like you're getting a pizza with 8 different slices. And I always associate that with my love of going to getting the VHS. When I went and got 3 VHSs, those stories were 3 different stories. They were 3 different films told by 3 different directors usually. Only Steve Miner directed multiple films in this series. Although you could technically say Sean took over Jason Goes to Hell, but we'll let Heart of Darkness cover that. But that if you look at it, the Friday the 13th fan is not a fan of one thing. It's a fan of variety. So if you try to pin Friday the 13th fans down in one specific area of the franchise and only tell that side of it, you're going to lose a portion of those fans because it's not the film they love. And if you're going to tell a new Friday, you got to get something that like all these fans can see that's new but is not going against what they believe. But if you're going to do multiple films like that, it's also behooves the rights holders to say, instead of trying to do a series that kind of follows one thing, why don't we make something for everybody? And if we release an episode, like a season worth 8 episodes, and they're 8 different stories, Well, if someone loves Jason Goes to Hell and you do a Jason in Hell film, well, guess what? That season, they're going to love that Jason in Hell film. That's going to be the one that stands out to them. That's the one that they're going to say, that's the best episode of the year.
Right.
And then there's going to be 7 more episodes and 7 more different fans that are going to be like, you're fucking wrong, and this is why. And then everybody starts talking. And that's Friday. And if you want to talk about the Friday the 13th fan, that's the Friday the 13th fan. It's in the debates. It's in the lists. It's in the rankings. It's in the discussion of it. It's not so much what happens in the film. It's what happens afterwards. It's the way we come out and we talk about it. And it has an effect on the box office.
Yeah. I think connections that we make outside of it.
Yeah, and that's ultimately what makes it so much fun to be a Friday the 13th fan, is that you kind of pick your lane and you defend your ground in what you love, and the decisions that you like and what you think Jason is, because he is kind of something you can manipulate. There is no one way to see it that's definite. The films didn't give us that. The films gave us a lot of open interpretation for what could have happened, and you can look at facts and they can line up with what you want, but then there's always 2 or 3 other things that you're like, I can't explain that. But even if you go to the other side, it's the same thing. It's like, well, I can make these facts line up, but there's still these other 2 that just, they fuck me. You know what I mean? Like, so it's really hard. I can see how hard it became for filmmakers, especially trying to do it myself, for telling a story. And that's really kind of the challenge of creating Friday the 13th, is that everyone tells you, oh, well, you just do the formula and you do this and that and bada bing, bada boom. It's like, well, why did it, 2009 did that? Why did it have the biggest drop-off numbers in the history of the box office? I love how Daniel Pearl, the cinematographer who says that Friday the 13th was a crap film and that they could do it better, and that how the 2 films that he worked on with Marcus Nispel broke records and all this stuff. Well, it's like, I'm sorry, buddy, but your film did break a record. It had the biggest drop-off because everyone walked out of the film and said, don't see it. Yeah. Everybody showed up because of the name on the title, not because of you, dickhead. Like, nobody showed up to watch. Like, if people loved your film and it really broke records, like, it would have been people coming back the next weekend and made another $60 million and would have made another $60 million after that. And you would have broke those types of records. What you broke is the worst record that you want to break. So don't come at me like you're some fantastical filmmaker that fixed Friday the 13th when you actually broke it into more pieces, and you pissed me the fuck off with your $20 million that you had. Sorry, but that's how I feel.
Oh, you're speaking the truth.
Hey, man. I
saw it one time, and my general, I'm in the group that says, hey, you took the first 4 movies and crammed them into a fucking hour and a half, and it didn't work. It absolutely did not work that way.
Well, how about this? The opening scene of the film, which is supposed to show Pamela, this ultimate moment, is so, you can't see what's going on. I can't see what's going on through most of the movie, Mr. Director of photography. Light your shit and color it correctly, please. How about this? How about the fact that Jason comes and picks up all the masks, but if you think about the timeline, he should be older if he survived and was human. Why is he still a boy 20 years later?
Yep.
Do your research. Like, if it's written by fans, why is no one catching this logic? Like, think about, and you know, it just felt that, like, they were like, ooh, we get to make a Friday. Yay, boobs. You're like, ooh, cool. Like, let's do all this stuff. Let's make him look like a ninja and give him a trench coat and a 15-foot machete that goes all the way down his leg, that when he pulls it out, he needs 2 hands because he's going to lift one and then grab it with the other. And it's like, how practical is this? And I'm all about entertainment logic. Don't get me wrong. Like, entertainment logic is what makes films films. But there comes a point where it's just like, it's a Michael Bay film. So it's way over the top, and it's not, I don't know. For me, it wasn't in the taste range of what I wanted for Friday the 13th.
Yeah,
that and they gave him hair, and I hated that.
Go ahead.
I kind of felt insulted with that film, to be honest with you, when I was watching it. I was like, seriously? It's just, like I said, they follow the formula. We'll just follow these teens in here, let them party. You have your stoner, you have this, you have that. It was a copy and paste film. It was a cash grab, and like I said, I felt insulted.
You know how
and
they
the characters
hooked me?
they do.
You know how they hooked me? They got me in the trailer when they showed Jason in his sack, and the way he was running at that girl and ready to swing, that was it. I was like, that is the Jason I want to see.
Everybody wanted that moment,
Yeah.
and the axe throw. Those are the 2 moments where the movie really shines. The axe throw was, I was like, this is the Jason I came to see in the film. I wanted to see more of this. I also thought that, like, I didn't like the kill where he stabbed him with, like, the screwdriver. I was like, oh, a screwdriver? That's not great. You know what I thought of is the kid was walking into that thing and they set up, and I thought that was going to be the kill and actually would have been interesting, was the bug zapper. I thought he was going to fucking jam that in his face. And I was like, oh, this is going to be fucking awesome. He's going to electrocute his head off. It's going to be great. And then it's like, I'm like, oh. And then
you kind of borrow the axe throw in Never Hike Alone, which I thought was.
Yeah, no, it's one of the, I mean, Jason kind of throwing objects kind of like from part 6. But the axe throw was funny. It was a test. You know, it started off as like a test to see like, oh, could we shoot a throwing scene? And we did, I studied, what was it? It was Battle Royale, the Japanese film. And there's a scene in the film where the character, one of the kids says something smart in the classroom and the dude just grabs a knife out of nowhere and throws it and hits the dude in the head. And so it was really an exercise to almost follow that pattern of like, this is how you make an axe throw, or this is how you make a throwing object thing work. And I actually had just worked on another show too that did a knife throw thing, that something stuck into the wall, and they did some stuff. And so it was cool to kind of like figure out how to cinematically tell that story of how do you throw something and make it look like real and not actually kill somebody. So throwing the fake axe and then having the real axe hit the tree and all that stuff, the series of shots and the way it looks. And, you know, on the day it looks silly, you know, because I'm like basically throwing this fake axe like nowhere. Like sometimes it went straight to the ground.
Over here while Andrew.
Although I got to say, the take that we used, it actually did hit the tree where Andrew was. Oh, so there were moments like we did practice and do it right and like kind of do that, but it all came from like that stuff. But yeah, I mean, a lot of Never Hike Alone, there's moments in the film that are direct kind of callbacks to the types of stunts that they designed in Friday the 13th. Like in part 3 when they, I think it was part 3. Or was it part 4? I think they established the second story toss in part 4. They did high falls. So it's funny, like as I started to restudy the films, I started to see the types of like things that they would use and reuse, like throwing people through windows and things like that. And so when the high fall became a thing and I looked at what I could afford and what I could do and what the resources that I had, I realized that, oh, I might not be able to do 12 kills because I only have one guy, but what I can do is recreate one of the most used stunts in Friday the 13th, which was the high fall. I believe they use it in 4 and 5 because they have the girl tossed out in 4 and she lands on the car. And then I think it happens again in 5 where she's got the cat and Roy tosses her out the window. Right. And so it was kind of one of those things like, okay, cool. That's a Friday the 13th callback. And so it was, even in the stunts in that way, we kind of did that and then created some new stuff. Like I've never seen Jason table slam anybody before. But it was like, what can I afford and what's cool and what would look rad? And so it was kind of like that, but you've seen, I don't know, it was weird to come up with how would Jason fight. That was definitely a super big challenge.